is a privilege to be before this
Campbell.
And I'm here to testify in support of repeal of the death penalty on behalf of the Maryland State Bar Association's Board of Governors. But I want to tell you that I come to this task informed by my 22 years of service as an assistant state's attorney and deputy state's attorney in Montgomery County and 4 years of prosecution in Howard County, and having served with some of you on the Maryland Commission on Capital Punishment. The MSBA is opposed to the death penalty because the MSBA's most important mission is to promote the fair and efficient administration of justice in Maryland. And the death penalty does not advance the interests of the fair and efficient administration of justice in our state. The Supreme Court 30 years ago said very plainly, if capital punishment should be imposed fairly and with reasonable consistency, or not at all. And our experience in Maryland, Mr. Chairman, is that it is not, it has not been, it is not now, and it cannot be by its nature imposed fairly and with reasonable consistency. The decision to file a death notice is up to each of the elected state's attorneys, responding to their own life experiences, the cases before them, the communities that they serve. I listened with great interest to the impassioned presentation of State's Attorney Schellenberger, for whom I have much respect. But the problem is that this is not the death penalty for Baltimore County. We're talking about the death penalty for the state of Maryland. Similarly situated defendants who do terrible things and have similarly reprehensible records are not treated alike in this state when it comes to the imposition of the death penalty. Worse, as the Commission on Capital Punishment learned, the process of the death penalty's application is fraught with racial disparity. We heard the numbers: 2.5 times greater chance of having a death notice filed against you if you're an African-American defendant than anyone else. And between 1978 and 1999, 43% of the victims in death-eligible cases were African-Americans, and during that period of time, none. Well, all of those who were on death row were there for killing white people. So, as a former prosecutor, and on behalf of the Board of Governors for the Maryland State Bar Association, in the interests of the fair and equitable administration of justice, I ask you to favorably report the repeal of the death penalty. And I think I heard that sound, Mr. Chairman, that tells me my time is up.
You did, Mr. Campbell, but thank you first for your service, because he was being in the State Attorney's Office in Montgomery County for many years. Did you prosecute capital cases yourself? I
did not. I participated in the process of making the decision, of advising the state's attorney on making the decision, and that process was compelling. I mean, it is probably fair to say that the likelihood of having a death notice filed against you is something akin to the likelihood of being hit by lightning. And in the criminal justice system, as the Supreme Court has told us, death is different. The power of the state, of the authority to impose a sentence of death is unlike the authority to do anything else in the criminal justice system or in any part of our government. And it carries with it the responsibility to ensure that the administration of the death penalty is done fairly, consistently, and rationally. And the problem is, with all the good intentions of many well-intentioned people in the state of Maryland who support the death penalty, it is not applied fairly, reliably, and consistently. And it can't do it. And what you've pointed to is simply one additional element of the arbitrary and capricious nature of its imposition. Another is the processes by which states' attorneys, and I participated in, and believe me, we tried to do our very best. But how do you take the next case when in the last case you have the survivor of the victims, 3 children and her husband who were killed by a man lying in wait inside their house, who says, I cannot bear to have you seek the death penalty in this case because I don't want my children and husband to be remembered as victims in gory crime scene photos in the court that will inevitably find their way into the public domain. How do you then, in fairness to your constituency as a whole, respond to the next victim who says, I want vengeance? That is not enough for this defendant. How do you work through to a rational, fair, and equitable administration of justice in such a terribly important decision? We tried, and I can tell you that my experience taught me, although I was lucky enough never to have been elected anything, so I didn't have the ultimate responsibility, but I felt it. I have to say that I came to the conclusion that were I the elected state's attorney, I just don't think I could find my way through that thicket. Nothing teaches us how to make that decision.
And then just other point I want to ask was the question about the racial significance of this. When the commissions who were on looked at that or other statistics, do they look at those simply in the jurisdictions that impose the death penalty, or do they look at that in all wide? Because I mean, I know if pharmacy doesn't impose it, then if those cases are included that could have possibly been death penalty and they never get asked for, then that would skew the results.
We had the Paternoster report presented to us, and as I recall, perhaps where did Senator Raskin go? You help me out.
I can ask him later.
Okay, my recollection of what we were told by the testimony we got was that they factored that in. They took that into consideration in reaching their very stark statistics of 2.5 times.
Okay.
So I think they have ways that are beyond my ken to be able to correct for those differences.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for your very probing questions.
Let me just when you were on the commission, this is my recollection from a number of years ago, but the previous state attorney from Baltimore County used to take the position that she would seek the death penalty in every case that was death eligible, which is one way, I suppose, of finding your way through the thicket. And as a result of that, what happened was that almost everybody on death row was from Baltimore County. Isn't that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And it's another example of how the way the system is set up now, and I don't think it can be cured, leads to the potential for that effect. Of course, the current state's attorney has eliminated that.
Right.
But, you know, it raises the other. And one of the reasons I think he did is that he knows, I think, what I certainly learned from 26 years of prosecution, and that is a very humbling lesson about prosecutorial fallibility. We make mistakes. And when you add prosecutorial, because we're human, fallibility to a system that is imperfect, and as good as our criminal justice system is, people, it is imperfect. When you add those two things together, even with the changes that the Maryland legislature made in 2009, there is error. There are going to be mistakes made. And in taking life, we simply ought not tolerate that, particularly when we have an alternative that protects the public. And that's life without parole.
Senator